Hey everyone, Jason here from Off the Beaten Path, and welcome to the final video in the Variety Trip series. So this is the Border Track, which is the Vic SA Border Track. Now, the entire border track is a couple of 100 kilometres long, I believe. We're focusing on the section that's about 60-70 k's long, which is largely the one-way section of the track. So just to note, this track is actually closed over summer. So it's closed from the 1st of November to the 31st of March. So the time to go and check this track out is from April to October. The great thing for those of us that like wheeling in the Vic High Country is that's when, approximately when, a lot of the tracks in the high country are shut, so you could plan a trip to go and do this. Now, they're closed during summer for this track due to the fire risk and also due to the sand just getting really soft during those hot summer days. So you can see we start our video pretty much at the start of the border track, although we've got some intro before that. The Hensley trig is a well-known landmark along the track, and then we got to the end of the one-way section. Now, for those of you that have been following the channel, you know we actually get towed off this track. This is where our trip comes to a definite and final end. So that route you see there is actually the route we got towed out on. So again, just some notes on the track. So it's open during summer, April to October. There is a vehicle entry fee of $12.50 per vehicle that you need to pay to SA Parks for entering. There's a number of campsites within this national park as well. It's Nagarkat National Park. You do need to pre-book those, and the fees do vary markedly from around $13.50 per night up to $52 per night. And the one-way section is north-south travel, so you need to enter at the top and then travel south. That's something that's pretty important to note. So you'll see when you see the video of the track why it is one way. Part of that is to prevent the hills getting churned up in both directions, and part of it is there's simply not room to reasonably overtake in a lot of sections of the track. It's an interesting area. The border track was obviously partially surveyed for the state borders, but European history in the area actually began in about the 1870s with sheep grazing. They did find that it was fairly low yield, not surprisingly. You can see there, there's a sign saying border track open, so they do have a few signs sort of noting whether the border track is open or not. So yeah, as I was saying, originally sort of a grazing area for European history, and there were a number of different pastoral leases, but they were basically abandoned over time due to low yields because there's not that much vegetation in the area. There are some ruins at Bucks Camp and Box Flat and Patendi Hut, which we didn't get to see. We were there, but you'll see why we didn't get to see it. And there's also a few wells that have been restored as well. So there's a fair bit of history in the local area. So you can see here we're entering into the conservation park on the northern end, and this entry is just a little bit to the west of the actual border track. And from here we make our way through. It's all really well signposted, really well signed. So from here we make our way through to the actual start of the border track. So on this particular day, we had picked the car up the day before from the mechanic in Adelaide, who had diagnosed the issue of the electrical issue and lights and everything that we were having on the dash that you would have seen from the Flinders Rangers, diagnosed that as a faulty alternator. So we had the vehicle in Adelaide at a mechanic for a day and a half while they sourced a replacement alternator and installed that. Now, they did give the vehicle back to us and say everything is working fine, but the battery light is still on your dash, but don't worry about it, everything is working fine. Should have probably been my first red flag. Anyway, look, they were they were a fully accredited workshop and all the rest of it, and you want to believe that they know what they're talking about. So you can see there one of the turn-offs to one of the side areas there. Again, those of you that have been following the channel know that clearly the issue was not the alternator, because we ended up broken down on this track, as you'll see. Look, we found there had been a bit of rain the week before, so the track was a little bit wet in places, and we found that the sand was really well bedded down and pretty firm. There's well established wheel tracks. The track does get a lot of traffic, particularly on weekends. Yeah, if you stay in those wheel tracks, we certainly didn't have any issues for the sections of this track that we were actually able to drive. Is a little bit wombat holey in places, as you can see. The vehicle's moving around a fair bit, but we certainly didn't have traction issues. Probably helped in no small part by the fact that the Pajero's a modern four-wheel drive, and in this particular instance the traction control was actually really quite helpful, as you'll see in some of the footage later on. So this is one of the big open plan sort of camping areas, I'm pretty sure, and as you can see, a few puddles here, and a turn off to the left there to Scorpion Springs. Now the drive through to the start of the border track, you can see some softer sand there. It's probably about half an hour, and this is the start of the one-way section. So again, like a lot of the things here, it's really well signposted. There's a sign there very clearly showing you this is the border track, this is where you are, and this is the one-way section of the border track. Yeah, really good, and then there's signage there as well indicating that it is closed at different times. Now, one thing that is worth mentioning, and it was very relevant for us, is that most of Nagarkat National Park and most of the border track, the one-way section in particular, there is no phone signal. So it is reasonably remote, not perhaps as remote as some of the parts of the high country where we might go touring, but it is reasonably remote, and we were doing it sort of on the shoulder season on a weekday. So this particular day, yeah, we'd camped the night before at Murray Bridge. We'd left Murray Bridge this morning and headed straight to the border track, come in via Pinaroo. So again, here you can see one of the early hills, well established wheel tracks. Sand's a little bit soft, but the wheel tracks are well compressed. Keep your tyres in those, run appropriate tyre pressures, and we really didn't have too much in the way of issues at all with the track, traction, and the ability to actually drive it. I believe people have towed camper trailers on this track. I'm not sure how much of a good idea that is. That being said, you know, we ended up getting recovered and towed out of here, and we're effectively a 3-ton anchor. It did they did need to actually winch us up some of the hills though. But yeah, your average camper trailer's clearly not that heavy. He's hoping anyway. So again, you can see there the vehicle moving up and down quite a lot, reasonably bumpy. You know, what you expect with sand tracks. It's kind of like choose your own adventure in some of these spots. Try and choose the spot that is least bumpy. And you can see there to the right what looks like probably an old alignment of the track. So we got the sense that the alignment of the actual border track changes over time as they try and revegetate different areas, or possibly they're just areas where tracks were pushed through and they weren't supposed to be. You can see here how soft the sand sort of is. Some good tyre impressions there from somebody who must have come through earlier. And watch the tyres, you can see the traction control doing a really good job just starting and stopping those when they start to spin, and just keeping us moving. So you can see with the size of those depressions there, or wombat holes. Each of the wheels were sort of lifting in turn, and the traction control did a really good job there of keeping us going. Not a lot of large trees in this area as well, if you did need to winch, so you know, recovery wise you're probably better off with a shovel and some max tracks or other recovery boards, more than likely. I wouldn't want to rely on finding a suitable sized tree to winch off if you got stuck. And the track does change a bit. You've got sections like this that are reasonably enclosed, and there's a bit of contour to it as well. There's not the big desert dunes that you might expect of somewhere like the Simpson or that sort of thing, but certainly there is a bit of contour climbing up and down some of these dunes. They're sort of longer, more undulating dunes than the steeper dunes you might see in the Simpson. And again, you can see here the wombat holes have been scalloped out with people driving the track. Good view there of the track ahead, and that was fairly typical. You'd sort of see in sections, you'd come up over a dune and then you'd see a long depression and a long climb to the next rise before the next part of the track unfolded in front of you. Now, from memory, it was roughly about 30 k's to the Hensley trig, and then about 30 k's past that to the end of the one-way section. But do check that. And as I mentioned, there's a few places along where you can pull off and camp as long as you've pre-booked with National Park. So again, a little bit of a softer section here. You can see the sand's deeper, again dug out. But you know, steady throttle control, and the traction control really did the job for us there, and we didn't have any issues. It certainly looked like some people had, but not for us. Suspension certainly got a workout on this track with all the undulating sections. As you can see there, it's a little bit like being inside a salt and pepper shaker or something, but again, just manage your speed, and it wasn't too much of an issue. So you can see there on the right hand side what looks like an old alignment of the track again, fenced off, and a no entry sign there, so clearly stick to the marked tracks. And you can see how tight this is with the bush basically right up to the track here, so no wonder it's one way, as two-way just wouldn't really be a viable option. And apologies for that sort of blurry spot there in the middle of the frame as well. That's something got on the lens of the GoPro, I think, and I hadn't realised it. It's just noticeable enough to be annoying. Again, you can see this is one of the long steady climbs, some pretty soft sand there, you know, and you do get a few wheel lifts, particularly in an IFS vehicle, but nothing to worry about overly much. You definitely want a 2-inch lift, I think, doing this, just to get that clearance where some of the ruts have been dug down in the sand. You wouldn't want to be bellying out. And yeah, following that one up around the corner, it did keep climbing a little bit further. And when you look at the map, yeah, the track looks pretty much dead straight the whole way, but it's certainly not. There's a few deviations where the track moves away from the border fence and then comes back towards it. And again, you'll see some vegetation areas like that are protected by a low fence, just to make sure you don't inadvertently drive where you shouldn't. And again, you can see the vehicle moving up and down a fair bit through the various sections here. So it is a sort of a bumpy track to be going on, that's for sure. So if you've got anyone in your group that is prone to getting motion sickness or car sickness, it's probably not the track to take them on. Maybe leave them at camp for the day, set up camp at one of the campsites there at the start, and you could always you could do this border track run, come out the bottom, and then take the bitumen back up to the start and return back to camp. We were wondering this particular day, we'd had some rain the day before, and I think we'd had a little bit of rain from memory on the way to the border track, so we're sort of constantly keeping an eye on those clouds as to whether it was going to rain or not. And you can see this particular section, some evidence of the last week's worth of rain. Again, might have been water on the track and a little bit wet, but the base of the track was quite firm, and yeah, it wasn't anything for us to be overly concerned about. Again, you can see the sand here just undulating. So look, it was great for us to actually get a chance to do a little bit of sand driving, given that was the original intention of this trip, was to get to the Simpson Desert and cross it, and we didn't ultimately get an opportunity to do that as it was closed at the time from both directions. If you've been following the series, you know we tried to go around to the western entrance, and so you know this is reasonably close to home, being on the Vic SA border. You could be here from where we are in northeast Victoria in a few hours. So just to the right there, that's one of the day use areas, and again there's a couple of these along the track. We just pulled into this one to have a bit of a look. So there's a little spots where you can pull off the track, have morning tea or a lunch break, just get out and stretch your legs, but these are not areas for camping. So they're day use areas only, so they're not camping areas, but a great spot to get off the track and stop for a break, and that way you're not in anyone's way parking up on the track trying to make your coffee or whatever the case may be. And again, you can see here how soft and thick the sand is, but those tyre tracks are well established and pretty firm. I don't think we were running anything too crazy. I think we were on about 20 psi, and that seemed very comfortable. Given my experience a year or so ago on Stockton Beach, I was certainly prepared to go lower if required, but on this day, in the conditions that were presented to us, 20 psi was more than satisfactory to get the job done. And again, off the top of my head, I think this was a Wednesday, so shoulder season and a Wednesday, so we didn't actually see anyone else on the track the whole time we were there. It's definitely a track I'd like to go back and actually finish. Maybe start a little bit higher up. I think some sections of the border track might actually go up as far as Renmark. I've got to look into that a little bit more, and I believe you can exit down near Bordertown. So as you just saw on the screen there, we're coming up on the Hensley trig. Not 100% sure on the history of the Hensley trig. Obviously trig points are marks used by surveyors to set out boundaries and things in the surrounding areas, their reference point, but the reason for this one being established and when it was established, wasn't able to find that sort of information. Somebody out there might know a little bit more about it than me. More than likely it was probably used in establishing the border.
About halfway through the border track, and we've reached Hensley's trig point. Not 100% sure of the significance, but we're here. There's the trig marker and a viewing platform. Photographer's platform. Cool. So this is up on the photographer's platform at Hensley's trig. There's the trig point. And here's the rest of the border track heading south. One big dune up ahead there. Very cool. And you can see the ground we've covered back behind us. Cars just down over there.
So yeah, great viewing platform there at Hensley Trig. Certainly seen plenty of photos posted in the past from that point by people, and gives you a good view and helps you appreciate that it is fairly remote. Like you could see there basically bushland in all directions. You are about 38 to 40 kilometres from the bitumen, and that's a point that I'm fairly acutely aware of. So again, long section here with those lower salt bushes or whatever they are. Vegetation is not really my thing, and you can see some thick soft sand here with a steady climb up ahead. And some of these sections you were able to make a pretty good pace. You just had to be conscious that there were going to be some wombat holes in various sections, and to slow down for those as required. And you can see here, this is the first section that we've come to where there's actually a choice. Hard to tell which is the easy track and which is the bypass. We opted to stick with where the main tyre tracks were going and go straight ahead. But there are a number of sections here where there's different choices to take, and that's what I've heard with people with camper trailers. They take the bypass track, so maybe the other line was the bypass line, I'm not really sure, but you can see here again those wombat holes, rocking the car side to side. Certainly doing a good job loading and unloading the suspension. And it just keeps going. So like I said earlier, you know, anyone in your entourage or group that gets a bit of motion sickness, if they want to tackle this, I definitely suggest taking, you know, if they have something they take for their motion sickness, to do that, or perhaps not coming along on this one. Because that motion of the vehicle side to side and up and down was fairly consistent throughout long sections of the track. And again, you could just see there the other track, which must have been the bypass track, coming back and rejoining the main track on the right hand side there. Another low saltbush section. The sand's not quite as thick here, and reasonably easy driving. Track fans out a bit on the corner here, and again some long corrugations or wombat holes that we're well and truly used to by the time we got here. And there was really no good line choices, and they all sort of funnel you into this crossing point on the top of the dune, and you've got that snapshot there of the track ahead and what's to come. So we're almost at the end of the driving part, so not too long after Hensley's trig, exactly like it came up on the screen there, the dash lit up. There's lights on the dash everywhere. The car's kind of gone into limp mode, and we're really struggling. We were quietly optimistic at this stage that we'd be able to still drive out, because we're able to climb that hill and this next hill, even though the car was kind of in limp mode. So pretty sure I'm driving there with the accelerator flat to the floor. And even in limp mode we're able to climb these hills. That's how nice and firm the sand was. And we only had probably 20 k's maybe of the border track, and then we thought it would be an easy run to the bitumen. So we were certainly hoping that we'd be able to nurse the car along and get our way out of there. Again, this section here was a little bit wet. Just taking it nice and easy, wanting to keep the car going. And trying to maintain a bit of momentum to get up this hill. Again, you can see you soon lose momentum in those dips, and we really just didn't have much in the way of power at this time. You can see the vehicle's just slowly crawling up this hill. Again, I'm pretty sure that I had the accelerator all the way down to the floor at this point. And you can see the car's working a lot harder because it just doesn't have the power that it should. And little did we know that hill was the last hill that we were actually going to climb up. As I said, we were quietly optimistic, and you can see up ahead there's another hill with a bypass track on the right hand side there that's a little less steep than going straight up the main track. And again, we're keeping a reasonably good pace here, trying not to brake or slow down because we wanted the momentum of the vehicle to help us out as much as it could. My mistake. This is the last hill. I thought this was the one with the split track, and that last one was the last hill. So yeah, this is the last hill we're going to make it up. So we've covered a few k's there with the dash lit up like a Christmas tree. Clear indication that something's going wrong, and the vehicle in sort of limp mode, underpowered. Yeah, so again you can see that split in the track with the bypass. So there's a view of the dash. We passed the track not too far back. Yeah. And you can see like it's in drive, neutral is flashing, other lights on the dash are on, and somewhere around here the engine just stopped, and we're actually just rolling, and we don't get too far in the sand rolling, and that's it. So that's where we are. 38 k's from the bitumen.
Okay, so here we are on the border track. As you can see from the bonnet up behind me, things are not going well despite having the car for most of the day yesterday and the afternoon before at the mechanics to look at an alternator issue. We've had some kind of electrical failure in the car part way along the border track here, and the car went into limp mode and has then since just shut down. So we're stuck here on the border track. Fortunately, I've been able to communicate with my wife via the Zoleo, so hopefully we can sort some sort of recovery out sooner rather than later. We're going to spend a bit more time here than we originally planned. So here we are, still on the border track, still broken down. But if you're going to break down, this is the way to do it. We've had some steak sandwiches for dinner. We've got a fire pit going, we've got some coffee, we've got light, still got comms with the Zoleo and the companion. Will from Bordertown is either going to come from that direction or that direction. We're not sure exactly which direction just yet. Probably got another 40 minutes or so till he gets here. Certainly been good having the companion independent USB power source, so being able to charge the Zoleo, charge the phones, maintain comms, and we've got gas, so we've been able to cook, make coffees, and yeah, obviously run the light there on the back of the car. That's running off the companion as well. Still got plenty of power in that. It's the weird thing about this, it's not like, I mean, the companion charges off the alternator, and as you can see there, we're drawing 20 watts. It's at, let me have a look at that again. It's at 90% and we've got 1,347 minutes of charge still. So that's the weird thing about this breakdown. Like, it seems to be electrical in nature, but you know, the companion's been charging. Anyway, we'll pack the kitchen up soon. We'll let this fire burn out a bit, and then we'll see where we end up. Let's just say that I'm loving the Zoleo, and I think it's earned its purchase price tonight.
Sounds like you're having a good time.
That is the lights and sound of Will from Bordertown, we presume. So yeah, it's now just after 8 o'clock, so looks like Will's here and looks like he's thinking about how to come down and turn around or something. I'm not sure, unless that's not him. So here we are, getting towed by Will from Border Towing out of the border track. He's doing a stellar job. It's about 8:30 and slowly but surely we're making our way out. So this is the third winch to get up this hill. Will's a bloody trooper. Top bloke. This is winch number 5 on the first hill of trying to recover the Pajero out of the border track on the Vic SA border. Small amounts of progress. So we're now 2 hours in to this recovery since Will arrived. We got up the first hill eventually. I think it was 5 or 6 winches in the end. We then had a bit of a run for a little while to maybe 1 to 2 kilometers. Got another hill. That was only 2 winches. It was a smaller hill. Here we are on what looks like a reasonably sizable hill, but it's hard to tell. This is our second winch on this hill so far. We have turned and we're heading away from the border on a side track back towards the main road, the bitumen, so that's something. So here we are, almost midnight. It's like 11:45, nearly 11:50, and we're getting towed now. So we've winched up a couple more hills. She's been slow, steady work, and yeah, we're heading away from the border track towards the bitumen. We're not sure what the plan is, but once we get to the bitumen, we'll get the car on Will's tow truck and probably try and find somewhere to crash for the rest of the night at a motel or something, and maybe tomorrow try and go to Horsham. Still going. Will's machine there is doing its job. You probably can't see on the video, throwing sand out left, right and centre as he's towing us to the main road. It is now almost 1 AM, but we're getting there. We've broken a couple of snatch straps and just about flattened his batteries, but we're getting there. So we're still about 9 k's from the bitumen, and Will has snapped the steering arm on his vehicle.
As you can see there, it was about 2 AM by the time we got to Patendi Hut, which is where Will had parked his tow truck. We got the Pajero loaded onto the back of his tow truck, and he left his D22 Navara there with a broken steering arm that he broke while recovering us. And we all loaded up and headed into town. So it was about a 40-minute drive or so from Patendi Hut into Bordertown, with the Pajero secured on the back of his tow truck. There was no 24-hour check-in motels or anything, and by this time it was like 3 AM anyway. So Will dropped us off at the Roadhouse in Bordertown that was open 24 hours and had a trucker's lounge with a couple of couches in it. We got some food and grabbed a couple of hours of shut-eye. Wasn't super comfortable, but you do what you do. And then from there, later that morning, we made a couple of calls to Mitsubishi dealers. We were going to go to Horsham, but they couldn't look at the car for about a month. So instead, we actually went to Narracourt, and we went there. They could look at the vehicle sooner, and there was an Avis rental car dealer there. So we thought we'd be able to get a rental car and drive home. That wasn't to be, but we did get home with a little bit of help from family in the end. Thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this video. See you in the next one, where we'll talk about what actually happened with the vehicle. It's now taken me another 4 months or so to actually finally resolve these electrical issues and figure out what the problem was, because the mechanic actually created another problem, but it's all finally fixed now. I've had further issues and recoveries. Been a pretty expensive exercise all up. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.